"You're nothing but a leech," my father shouted, then hauled my suitcases to the curb. Mom just muttered, "It's time you learn to stand on your own." I didn't fight it. I just drove off. 2 weeks later, my phone blew up. "Why is the joint account empty?" I shot back, "Go ask the leech." 5 minutes later, my uncle was calling me nonstop. I 26M, got thrown out of my parents' house on a Tuesday morning. No warning, no build-up, no conversation. Just my father standing in the driveway at 8 a.m., dragging my 2 suitcases to the curb like he was putting out garbage, telling me I was nothing but a leech on this family. My mother stood in the doorway and said it quietly, almost gently, that it was time I learned to stand on my own. Then she went back inside. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds. Then I loaded my car and drove away. I want to give you the full picture so you understand how we got there, because none of this came out of nowhere, even if it felt that way to me in the moment. I am the youngest of 3. My 2 older siblings moved out years ago, built their own lives, and check in maybe 4 times a year. I was the one who stayed. Partly because I was finishing a 2nd degree, partly because I genuinely believed I was contributing something to the household. I paid a reduced rent, I handled the groceries twice a week, I fixed things when they broke, I drove my parents to appointments when they needed it. My father had a health scare 2 years ago, and I was the one who took time off to sit with him through the follow-ups. I did not do these things expecting a trophy. I did them because they were my family, and it felt natural. What I did not know, what I found out slowly, the way you find out about a leak in the roof, one stain at a time, was that my father had been building a version of me in his head that had nothing to do with who I actually was. In his telling, I was coasting, living off them, refusing to launch. Every time my siblings called home, he apparently complained about me, though they never said a word to me about it. My mother, I now believe, had been quietly agreeing with him for months, maybe longer. About a week before the suitcase incident, my father had brought up the idea of me moving out, but casually, like it was something we might discuss over time. I told him I was already saving, that I had a plan, that I'd be out by summer. He nodded. That was the extent of it. There was no ultimatum, no date set. I thought we were fine. And then Tuesday happened. I went to my closest friend's place. He asked no questions, just cleared out the spare room and told me to stay as long as I needed. That first night, I sat on the edge of the bed and went through everything in my head trying to find where I'd missed it, what signal I'd ignored, what version of myself they had been seeing that I didn't recognize. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text. I had nothing to say that wouldn't come out broken or angry, and I needed to not be either of those things right now. I needed to think clearly, because there was something I had to decide. The joint account. Here's the part that matters. About 8 months earlier, my father had added me to a joint bank account, the household expenses account, he called it. The reason was practical. He'd had another minor health episode, nothing serious, but it rattled him, and he wanted me to be able to handle bills and payments if something happened, and he was in hospital. He walked me through every standing order, every direct debit, explained what everything was. My name went on the account. I never touched money I wasn't told to touch. I used it twice, once to pay the plumber, once to cover the broadband renewal when his card declined and he was traveling for work. When he threw me out, that account had roughly 4 months of household expenses sitting in it. Not a fortune, but not nothing either. He hadn't thought about it when he dragged my suitcases to the curb. I had. I spent 3 days deciding what to do. Not 3 days of scheming. 3 days of genuinely sitting with the question of whether I had any right to it, whether taking it would make me the person he'd called me, whether I'd be able to live with myself after. I talked to my friend about it. I looked at my situation clearly. I had no place to live, a job that paid okay, but not enough to cover a deposit plus first month's rent in our city on short notice, and parents who had just shown me, without any room for misinterpretation, that they were done with me. I also thought about my father's voice when he said Leech. He hadn't been angry in the way people get when they're scared or stressed. He'd been contemptuous. That's the word. Like he'd decided something about me a long time ago and was finally just saying it out loud. On day 4, I transferred the balance to my personal account. Every penny. Then I sent a single message to my father telling him I'd done it, that the account was empty, and that I wished them well. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I just sent it and put my phone face down. I turned my phone over 11 days later. There were 43 messages. Most of them were from my father, escalating in a way I recognized. The first few confused, then demanding, then the kind of cold that's worse than shouting. My mother had messaged asking me to call her, using a tone she only ever uses when she's worried about how something looks rather than how something is. There were a few from my older brother, who had apparently been briefed on a version of events that did not include the word Leech or the Tuesday morning driveway scene. And then there were the missed calls from my uncle. My uncle is my father's younger brother. He's the only person in my family I've always trusted completely, not because he's soft or because he takes my side automatically, but because he's honest in a way the rest of them aren't. He'll tell me when I'm wrong. He's done it before. So when I saw his name 14 times on that screen, I called him back before anyone else. He picked up before the second ring. He asked me straight away if I was okay, physically okay, and I told him I was fine. Then he told me what was happening back home, and the picture he painted was not the one I expected. Apparently, my father had been telling family members that I'd stolen from them. That word, stolen, not took money from the joint account I was legally named on, but stolen. My mother had not corrected this framing. My older brother, who'd been told the stolen version, had apparently offered to help them take legal action. The whole extended family had been informed, or partially informed, depending on who my father had got to first. My uncle had not believed the stolen version. He'd asked my father directly how my name had got onto the account, and my father had apparently gone vague in a way that told my uncle everything he needed to know. Then he'd asked my mother whether there had been a conversation before the suitcases, and she'd said something non-committal that was also everything he needed to know. He wasn't calling me to tell me to give the money back. He was calling to tell me to get ahead of the story before the story got ahead of me. I asked him what he thought I should do. He said I needed to write down a clear account of everything. The account, how it was set up, why, every transaction I'd made from it, what happened that Tuesday morning, the exact words used, and that I should be prepared to share it if I was accused openly and formally. He also said, gently but clearly, that he didn't think I should return the money, because doing so would validate a narrative that was a lie, and I'd been through enough already. I wrote it all down that night. Dates, amounts, context. I still have it. Update 1, 1 week later. My brother called. The real call, not a message, an actual phone call, which was unusual enough that I answered. He'd clearly been speaking to my uncle, because his tone was different from his messages. Less certain. He said he wanted to hear my side of it, and I gave it to him plainly, without editorializing, without making him feel bad for initially believing my father's version. I read him the bank account setup facts. I told him the date, the time, the specific words my father had used in the driveway. My brother was quiet for a long time. He said he hadn't known about the driveway. My father had told him I'd left on my own after a disagreement. My mother had said nothing to correct it. He didn't apologize for the legal action offer, not directly, but he said he'd been wrong to jump in without all the facts, and for my brother, that's as close as it gets. He told me he wasn't going to push me to reconcile with my parents, but he hoped I wouldn't let this be permanent. I told him I wasn't sure what permanent looked like yet, and that was honest. What I didn't tell him was that the money was already working. I'd paid a deposit on a small flat. I'd furnished it with the minimum needed to live. I had a buffer in my account for the first time in my adult life, not because I'd stolen anything, but because I'd taken what I'd been entitled to from a situation I'd been pushed into without warning or dignity. I want to be careful here, because I know how this looks from the outside. I know some people reading this will think what I did was extreme or disproportionate, or that I should have left the money and taken the moral high ground. Maybe. But when someone looks at you with contempt and says the word leech, when your own mother murmurs something about standing on your own and walks back inside, something in you recalibrates. The version of me that would have driven away and left that money sitting there, waiting for a conversation that never came, would have been the version of me that believed what they said about me. And I don't believe it. I never did. Update 2, 3 weeks later. My father sent a formal letter, an actual printed letter, which I think was supposed to signal seriousness, and it did, just not in the way he intended. The letter said that I had taken money that belonged to the household, that my presence on the account had been a practical arrangement and not a permission structure, and that he expected repayment within 30 days or he would involve a solicitor. I showed it to my uncle, who showed it to a friend of his who does property and family financial law. The answer came back clear. A joint account holder has full legal access to the funds in that account. There is no actionable theft. The letter had no legal force. My father either knew this and was bluffing, or had not actually spoken to a solicitor before sending it. And given that no solicitor followed, I think it was the latter. I did not write back. I sent nothing. I had said what I had to say in that one text message the morning after I transferred the funds, and I didn't feel the need to add to it. What I did do was block both my parents' numbers. Not out of anger. That part had passed, or at least quieted down to something manageable. I blocked them because every time a notification appeared, even unread, it cost me something. Sleep, focus, the fragile peace I was building in the new flat. I needed to stop paying that cost until I was in a stronger place. My uncle I kept unblocked. My brother I kept unblocked. My brother came to see the flat last weekend. He brought food, sat at my small table, and we talked for 3 hours about things that had nothing to do with any of this. His kids, a project I was working on, a football match we both cared about. At the end, before he left, he said that our father had told him that all of this had been for my own good, that he genuinely believed the tough approach would make me move faster. I didn't respond to that directly. I just told my brother that intent doesn't cancel impact, and that I hoped our parents were well, and that I wasn't ready for anything more than that right now. He nodded. He understood. I think he has always understood more than he says. Update 3, final update. It's been 2 months since the Tuesday morning driveway. I have a flat. I have a routine. I wake up and there is no one waiting to interpret my day as evidence of failure. That sounds small when I write it down, but it is not small. It is the whole thing. My uncle called last week and said my father had asked about me, that he'd seemed different, not apologetic exactly, but quieter, less certain. My uncle said he thought my father was sitting with something, the way people do when the story they've been telling themselves stops adding up. I didn't know what to do with that information, so I just sat with it too. I am not looking for a dramatic reconciliation scene. I don't need my father to stand in a driveway and say that he was wrong, though that would be something. What I would need, if I'm honest, is just a single conversation where the words he used that Tuesday are acknowledged for what they were, not justified, not recontextualized, just acknowledged. That might happen. It might not. I can live either way now, and that's the part one didn't expect, that the thing he'd called me, that ugly word, would become the thing that finally made me stop asking for his approval. My mother has not reached out. I think about her sometimes, about the way she said what she said, not angry, just tired, like she'd been waiting for that morning for a long time. I don't understand her fully yet. Maybe I will. Maybe understanding her is a project I have to earn my way into slowly, when I'm ready. The money is mostly spent now, rent, deposit, the basics of a life I'm building on my own terms. If you're doing the math and wondering whether it was worth it, here's what I'd say. It wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that for the first time in 26 years, I responded to my family's version of me by simply refusing to act like it was true. The account was just the mechanism. The decision was about something else entirely. I'm okay. Actually okay, not performing it.